Tired of spending all that money on those gas station pills every night? You should be. Join the Discord. You'll be making so much money, your performance in bed won't even matter. All right, so in today's video, we're going to take a look at the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, the Russell 2000, the dollar, the bonds. We're going to take a look at all of these different things, try to figure out what the next steps are for the market. And it's going to be a fun video. All right, so without further ado, let's get started with the video. All right, the link to the Discord is in the comments or in the channel description. Let's get serious. Let's get serious. All right, so first and foremost, this is a chart of the NASDAQ. All right, today, obviously, the NASDAQ was outperforming the Russell 2000. A big reason why the NASDAQ did very well today is because Nvidia did really, really well. Google did really, really well. And Amazon did very, very well. So Amazon specifically, they got some positive news. So Amazon in talks to acquire streaming rights to more pro sports. Amazon can soon be carrying games played by more than 40 MLB, basketball, and hockey teams on its Prime streaming platform as part of its broader package that would see the e-commerce and logistics company also acquiring an equity stake in the Diamond Sports Group. So obviously this is in direct competition to Netflix. This increases their reach for streaming as well as sports. So this is a very, very important and good news, basically. And that's a big reason why Amazon started to do well like this. And in response to Amazon doing this, Netflix also got a bit of a sympathy play. And Netflix also did pretty well. Let's take a look at Apple. Apple dipped a bit. Tesla didn't do too hot either. And let's take a look at Microsoft. Microsoft was pretty flat and didn't do much either. So all in all, what ended up really pushing the market was positive news out of Amazon, tech stocks as a whole, and Nvidia. So a lot of these companies in general were just flat or slightly bullish, or so basically it was pushed up by these companies. All right, so now the next steps to really think about is how much further. So now let's zoom out. Obviously Google, Amazon, and Nvidia were the biggest winners. When you're looking at AMD, AMD is a chip stock also, obviously, right? AMD is hovering at the highs. Tesla is hovering at the highs. It made a new high. It had a bit of a pullback today, so intraday, and we ended up closing within the Bollinger Bands. So Tesla intraday showed a lot of strength as well. So these we didn't even look at Meta. So Meta also did really, really well. So these companies, right? The question is for the losers, for the ones that are lagging a bit, if they hold support while these companies, I was showing how Meta was a lagger and it was going to catch up, and now it ended up breaking above the recent highs. So now we need to see if the same concept appears with Microsoft, if the same thing ends up happening with Apple, and we really need to see how much Amazon pumps off of this. But essentially, all in all, this is really, really bullish. This is very, very bullish for the tech stocks. Okay, and it goes without saying that they are just continuing to do very, very well. So the NASDAQ as a whole, you clearly see that yes, we opened within the Bollinger Bands today. We know that. So the NASDAQ, right? We opened and closed 3 times outside of the upper Bollinger Bands. That is generally very, very bearish, right? Meaning we should get a pullback, right? That's what I mean by bearish. We should end up getting a pullback. The fact that we opened a bit red, but then we ended up closing green and just being green the entire rest of the day, basically. And open and closing outside of the upper bands. Basically, what this shows is that the overextension to the upside can continue. We opened inside the bands and we closed outside. The bands are now like shooting upwards, right? So with the bands shooting upwards, so imagine like the bands are shooting upwards like this. If the candles end up closing like this, and then we open up tomorrow, we just continue staircasing up. We'll still open, like this, and then we could close outside for the next candle. The bands will still be going up. So it's not as if we're gonna have 3 consecutive opens and closes outside the bands anymore. It seems because the bands are also rising up. So we can just continue just continue staircasing here, and the bands will just continue to I hope this makes sense. The bands are continuing to rise, and the candles can continue to close outside of the upper bands without it ever really being this overextended like it was for these 3 days. So this is a really, really bullish for the NASDAQ as a whole in general. So that's what's currently going on with the NASDAQ. Obviously, we have very high psychological resistance at 410 on the NASDAQ, and then the high on the NASDAQ from November 22nd, 2021 is at 408.71. Today, we had a high of basically 408, and we're basically 80 cents away from the all-time high on the NASDAQ. So that is pretty interesting, to say the least. When we're taking a look at the IWM had an inside day. The NASDAQ got most of the love, and the IWM did not as much, right? We had a bit of an inside day. They're trying to really burn bulls and bears with this lack of movement in terms of price action. So we just had a nice consolidating inside day. The IWM was the biggest winner. Retail companies got a lot of love because the Fed announced potentially so many rate cuts in 2024. They are expecting 6 to 7 rate cuts in 2024, which is very, very bullish for consumer companies, for economically sensitive stocks. And all of those companies are in the Russell 2000 or the IWM, which is why the IWM got the most love from the positive news from the Fed and Powell. So now, it makes sense. Money needs to we need to consolidate a bit. Today was the first day after OPEC's. We had options expiring on Friday, before the weekend, right? So it makes sense that we're having a bit of the market needs to stabilize a bit. So think about it in terms of if you hit a spoon against a cup, it's gonna vibrate, right? It's gonna vibrate a lot. It needs to basically once it stops vibrating, it basically evens out and it balances itself. But it feels like the bzzz. Does that make sense? So that's currently what's going on, in my opinion, on the IWM. It needs to balance itself out a bit, and then it'll end up making a decision. Obviously, it's very, very difficult to just outwardly short with conviction against the Fed, right? So right now, the most sense is to wait for pullbacks before going long. Definitely, you cannot really go long swings up here. And the other thing is just safely just day trade, honestly. Just take some scalps during the day. Make your money. Don't try to catch tops and everything like that in the market right now. If you do want to go short, you need time. You need to enter with time on the contracts. But it's difficult to go long. It's difficult to outwardly short, especially against the Fed. Number one thing, in my opinion, right now is day trading. This is a day trader's market at the moment. It's very difficult to see which direction the market is going to go, in my opinion. There are other times, when we are like, when there's much better swing opportunities. Now is not really one of those times, in my opinion. So there's that for the NASDAQ and the IWM. Let's go ahead and take a look at the VIX, the dollar, and the yields. All right, so the yields, we know, have an inverse relationship to the market. When the yields are doing well, the market should be falling. All right, so today we didn't have that big of a day on the yields. Today was flat and bullish, like I was saying in yesterday's video. This strength in the yields did not really translate into weakness in the market. So we need to see if the yields can start to finally break above the convergence of these trend lines here. So this was a falling wedge that we created, right? This right here was a falling wedge. The support and the resistance are converging today, right? So now tomorrow, the market, when trend lines basically converge like this, it usually means there's an important crossroads, or there's something important that's going to end up happening on the market. So it's really, really interesting. And I'm interested to see which direction the yields are going to go now, to be honest. Next, the VIX. So the VIX, we know, has an inverse relationship to the market as well. When the VIX is rising, usually the market tends to fall. But at the moment, the VIX had a bit of a rise. The VIX also does well when there's a lot of call volume also. And in general, when there's a lot of volatility. So I was saying how the VIX would be neutral to bearish, neutral to bullish, and it was. But this strength in the VIX did not translate into weakness in the market. What's interesting, though, is that we can see that the lower level of the VIX Bollinger Bands are starting to increase as well. So, which means that, it's going to take a really big move. First of all, this is bullish for the VIX, the fact that this is happening, right? Second of all, as it's increasing like this, the VIX can have like a big red day, and we would then just be overextended to the downside, which would lead to a bounce on the VIX once we close or show weakness outside of the lower Bollinger Bands. If this is confusing to you guys with the Bollinger Band videos, let me know. I can probably go ahead and make a video describing the Bollinger Bands a bit more in detail. I also posted a course. I made a course also describing the Bollinger Bands a bit more in detail. So definitely check that out. It's on the channel if you guys are interested. Definitely, comment, and I'll link that as well. So, the lower Bollinger Bands are rising. Similar to the concept that I was showing with the NASDAQ, the upper Bollinger Bands were rising. We can continue to rise, right? And, if we have a big, strong, weak day on the VIX, while the Bollinger Bands are continuing to rise, the lower level, if we have another big red day, then we're going to be very, very overextended to the downside on the VIX. And at that point, it would make sense to go long the VIX. And which generally, as we bounce on the VIX, it should be bearish for the market. Last but not least, let's take a look at Dolores. So the dollar also has an inverse relationship to the market. If the dollar is rising, then the market should be falling. And I was mentioning how today would also be neutral or bullish. And it was basically neutral. We didn't do too much on the dollar, so there's not much to look at. The one thing is that when we have an open outside of the lower level, the next day is generally neutral or bullish. And basically, as long as we can hold the 50% fib of this green candle here, we can continue rising. And if we continue rising and we start showing strength above these levels of resistance and prior levels of support, then that is going to show weakness in the overall market, in my opinion. So now taking a look at the SPY, basically all-time high on the SPY is basically 480, right? So we're a ways away in terms of the all-time high on the SPY, but this is still, this is a pretty bullish setup. We have support here. We held support. This held up. we still have room to go to 490, but it's difficult to just start swinging long. So if we do have a bias over the day, right, the easiest thing you could do is whatever the bias or whatever the momentum is on the daily or the 4-hour time frames, you can use that on the smaller time frames to trade with. So to day trade with specifically. So that's currently, you know, like we're holding 470. Yesterday, on Friday, we held this trend line and then we gapped up today. So, you know, we basically just need to see what ends up happening now. It's kind of difficult to ascertain what's going to end up happening. We do have this level of support, the trend line support that held on Friday, and that, you know, has been acting as resistance. And then on Friday, it acted as support really perfectly. So that level on for tomorrow is going to be at 469.80, which is basically 470. So 470 is a major level of support for tomorrow. In my opinion, if we can break below 470, 468 is going to be the next major level of support. But if we break and close below 466, then that would be pretty bearish for the next day, in my opinion. But, you know, the more inside days we have like this of just consolidating or just, you know, not really breaking out as much, the more opportunity we have to, honestly, it's really difficult. For the bullish case, what I will say is that if we close above 473, like a nice comfortable close above 473, because on Thursday we had the high of 473.73. If we can close above 473, we can easily see 476. So that's pretty interesting. And then at that point, we could also see right now the upper level of the Bollinger Bands are rising on the SPY. Things are showing bullishness, similar to the bullishness that we saw out of the NASDAQ. Things are looking good. So we can just continue staircasing above the same way that we were like I showed on the NASDAQ. We can just continue staircasing above. But then, you know, it's just a matter of making bears so tired for trying to short all of these staircasing moves up that eventually, once all of the bears become bullish, that's when they're going to end up rugging the market. And it's going to be fun to see what ends up happening in these next few weeks. Seasonality wise, the last few weeks of December are bullish. And of course, also on the VIX, the last week and a half on the VIX is also bullish for the VIX. So yeah, you know, the Fed is showing positive news. S&P seasonality is bullish. Lots of bullish signs, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. I would be very hesitant to try to lean long aggressively up here. This is the perfect opportunity for people to get manipulated into going long. Especially after a lot of strength has already been shown. So keep that in mind. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you.